Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and thank you for joining me for another episode. My guest this week is Cristina, and she runs the Etsy shop Lacey Fields, and we're going to be talking about not just selling on Etsy because most of us are doing that right now, but other things involved in what it takes to run a successful business and live life at the same time. So, Cristina, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I am too. Now, before we jump into our conversation, or I should say before we continue, because you and I have already been talking, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Cristina, and I have 3 children, 2 of them that I had while already running Lacey Fields. My idea with Lacey Fields was really a funny one. I actually was a lawyer. I went to law school, and while I was working my day job, I designed a print for my husband, who is my high school sweetheart. And we kind of, after so many years, you run out of ideas on what to give someone. And so I designed a print for him. And somebody I worked with said, "You should list that. That's adorable." And kind of on a whim, I listed it. And it sold really quickly. And I think about 5 months later, I had quit my job and I started running Lacey Fields full time. And it's been about 6 years and I've never looked back.
Cristina, that's the kind of story that so many people dream of. And I'll be honest, it's not the norm. So hopefully everyone doesn't think that that's always how it happens. But what did you do to determine, or how did you determine when the right time was to walk away from the security of your full-time job?
Well, it was a couple things. One of them was just time. I was working during the day, and then I would come home and I would work until almost midnight. And at the time, I did not have a labeler to work with my shipping. So then I would have to go to the post office at midnight with that automated machine and get my labels. And finally I did that for a few months and I was just exhausted. So I finally had a conversation with my husband one day and I said, if I can make the same amount as what I'm making right now for 2 months, I think I could maybe do this. And he completely agreed. And 2 months later, I put in my 2 weeks notice.
Wow.
And you're so right that is not the typical path. And I will say that since then I have continued. That just must be my strife in life because I end up having so many things that aren't typical. But with that, has definitely since then come droughts of sales that, were less than what I was making. I would love to say, oh yeah, and every year since then I've made more, and some years that has happened and some years that has not. And so it's always a work in progress on how to be better as a businesswoman.
A couple of questions. First of all, were you not scared for your life to go to the post office at midnight?
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why I started having that conversation with my husband.
Okay.
And many times he would actually go for me.
Okay.
Because of that. Yes. And then what really, really revolutionized my world, and I could not, I can't give a resounding endorsement enough to the Dymo 4XL label makers.
Yes.
Now, when I did this 6 years ago, this was just rolling out with Etsy to print out the shipping labels, formatted to the 4x6 and stuff. But they're about $200. I highly recommend them.
Yes.
Not just that, but you will save money in the long run because of your commercial rates.
Yes.
And so, I saved money years ago by buying it. Mine is still the exact same one that I had 6 years ago. And so once I did that, it was awesome because I could just run, to the post office if I didn't have a priority that day. And I could just drop them off at the ledge, didn't matter. Or I could put them in the little chute. And so saved time and saved sanity.
I completely agree with you about the Dymo. I will have a link to it in the show notes for this episode. I know I've mentioned it before, and I think I actually wrote a post about it on convome.com, the blog, because when I discovered it, I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, and I could not believe that nobody had ever mentioned it. I happened to just see it on Etsy. It was one of the ones they recommended. And so I bought it because I was so frustrated with how I was doing my labels, and I was wasting ink. It was very unprofessional, I'll admit. I was printing them on 8.5 by 11 sheets and then cutting and pasting. It was not professional at all. And with this, you're right. You save so much money because you're using less ink. It's a thermal printer. So you never have to replace any ink. But I'm preaching to the choir telling you this. I will put it
and another tip I can give is that you can buy different rolls that are not necessarily their brand. And that's what I do. Oh, yeah. So I buy them on Amazon, and I think that they're 1/8 of the cost. And they say on there that it will, it's possible to damage the Dymo. That's why I made the point of mine is still the same one, because I think I have saved probably over $2,500 by getting the cheaper labels. And so by now I'm fine if it would ruin my Dymo, because that's $200, but yeah, I get them in, I get a pack of 8 rolls, and that lasts me forever because there's 250 in there, in each roll. And yeah, it really is such a big help.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm one of those people, I color within the lines, and if they say it's going to ruin the printer, I won't do it. And so I always just buy the one, their own, which at the back of my mind, I always feel like they say that to scare us, but then I'm always too afraid to try it. So it's good to know, because I do buy my supplies on Amazon, and I see the other ones because they'll tell you, oh, you can get this as well, and they are a fraction of the price. But that fear of messing up my label printer, I'm like, no, Dymo said not to do that. So
if it messes yours up, you never heard that from me.
Yes, I'll forget this conversation. Now, one of the things you mentioned was that over the course of running your business, which you've been running it since 2012, you've had some sales droughts. And I know we all have times of, ebbs, and the tide flows up and down in our shops. How do you handle times of low sales and sales drought, especially since now this is your full-time thing, so you don't have that job to rely on anymore? What do you do?
Well, so this has taken me years to get there. The first time that I experienced droughts, I really went to a negative space, and I hit refresh all the time looking for sales. And I honestly even would go to the forums, and I would see so much negativity that negativity brought me down. And one day, after a busy season, I had a slow day, and I actually really was thankful for it. And I realized all of a sudden, wait a minute, that's how I need to see the slow seasons. I need to see them as a blessing to get other things done. So usually that means that I design new items, or I work on my Pinterest page, or I write on my blog, or God forbid, I take some self-love time. And so that will mean, that I read a book for pleasure. And when I do that with so many people, we're artists, it's not like we can just snap a finger and think of something really artistic and creative. That takes a certain space. And so self-love and patience enables me to actually be a better designer in the long run.
Yeah. Yes, thanks for sharing that, because I know our first instinct is to panic when we're not getting sales and, try and figure out how to fix things. But like you said, it's a good time to step back and use that time to do other things that we need to do to keep our businesses running and in good shape, and, spend time doing things that we otherwise wouldn't have time to do. And I just realized we haven't talked about what you actually sell.
You're right. So I do anything paper goods related. That's kind of my motif. The other part of it is that I do everything personalized. So nothing in my shop is not personalized. Okay. As we, I rebrand every few years, and my idea right now is that my little tag would be paper goods for every freaking occasion, because that's my idea behind it. So it's prints to give as gifts, prints for weddings, prints for nurseries, etc. I do a ton of invitations. So and that goes from something really broad, like, a first birthday, to something really specific, like a mermaid bachelorette. And then a newer product line that I've been doing is cards. And so that goes from usually, things that are more like, Hannah, will you be my bridesmaid, to our new collection that I am calling the I Hear You, I See You collection. And that is for people struggling with illnesses and feeling alone through that. And so it is one that, for example, will say, back pain sucks. I hear you, I see you, Hannah, or whatever name, I'm thinking of you. And those are ones that are really near and dear to my heart. So that the cards are something that I'm very excited to keep rolling out more.
How do you handle running a shop where everything is personalized? Does that mean that with every single transaction, you have to communicate with your customers before you start working on their products?
No, it's after.
Okay.
So they purchase the item, and then in their seller to note, they will tell me the information. So for example, on the invitation, let's say the mermaid bachelorette, they will tell me in the seller to note, this is for Hannah. Our party is on September, 20th at this location. And then I input the information for them, and different shops can have different rules on this. When I first started, I did an endless amount of proofs for them, which just became really counterintuitive with time, because some people are very easy and some basically wanted a custom design for $10, which just didn't work. So now I have a rule of I send you a proof and we can make one round of edits. And usually it's people saying, hey, now that I see it like this, I don't like, how bunched up this looks. Can we make this a little simpler? Can we just put the bride's first name or whatever it may be? And then I either print or email them their final version. And so, so that's how it works.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking, man, that's a lot of communication before anything happens. But
yeah, I mean, after it definitely is. One blessing with that, though, is you get to know some of your customers quite a bit.
Yeah.
And they start coming back to you. Then I have one customer that she just seems like the sweetest person, and it's a baby stats print that says the name of the baby, where they were born, and she's bought over 20 from me, as every friend of hers has a baby. And She always says, "I'm back," in her purchase note. And
Nice.
she's just darling. And so I feel like we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit because we have written back and forth probably over 100 times through the years.
Wow. Nice. And that's one of the things I do like about Etsy is it does afford you that freedom to, or I don't know if it's a freedom or a luxury or just the opportunity to get to know your customers on a different
Oh, yeah.
level, like an old time store.
Yes. And it's quite nice because so many of us that work from home, or even if we have an office space or something, it can get a little lonely if you don't have employees, or
Yeah.
even if you just have one employee or something, you're not in a workspace with a ton of people. And
Yes.
that was probably the thing I missed the most when I quit working my other day job, was just interaction. And so those convos sometimes are a big blessing for me because I feel like I at least did speak with a lot of people that day.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I think that's one of the things um, a lot of people don't realize or don't think about in great detail when they think about quitting their jobs and working full time from home, is that there is a loneliness factor because you're going to be working by yourself, at least during the day when everyone else is out of the house. And for me, sometimes I miss talking to people. And so when I get to have conversations for the podcast, I'm like, yes, I have someone to talk to today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so be aware of that if you're not yet fully working from home alone, is that it can get lonely. That's a reality of working from
Mhm.
home.
Agreed.
One of the things I wanted, what was I going to ask? Oh man, I lost my train of thought. Oh, now I remember. So when you first started selling on Etsy, for you, it was nice because you had a product that immediately caught fire, or in Etsy, in the Etsy world, I would say went viral because soon after you listed it, people started buying it. But prior to that, even though you didn't have any expectations, did you have any reservations about actually selling your design, or putting it out there for people to buy?
This is kind of funny because I didn't and I should have. Um,
Why?
I was a little naive and
Mm.
I just saw the beauty in all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as time went on, I started realizing the difficulty of things that can happen. So for example, things such as, like I said, my things are personalized. So if I had somebody that provided me the incorrect spelling and I sent it to them, and then they wrote back that they had typed it incorrectly, but they wanted me to send them another free item because I should have known that that's not how they wanted to spell that name.
Mm.
Or things getting lost in the mail and them being frustrated with me, or, those kinds of things. And those are really and truly the small percentage of Etsy buyers.
Mm-hmm.
But those things I should have had more reservation of, being more prepared
Yeah.
and learning how to deal with the very rare, very, very rare bad review, because it would bring me down and it shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of time to get there.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I mean, even just one bad review, and then to get to have it happen again, I know can take you to a place where you really don't want to go, because I've had
Yeah.
that, and it wasn't even a 1 or 2 star. I think it was like a 3 star, and I felt like the biggest failure because I was like,
Yes,
wait,
and
what?
I think I've had 2, 3 stars out of a few thousand.
Yeah.
And so and I really don't ever feel like they were quote unquote my fault. But on
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, They were, because, you want your customer to be happy. So
Mm-hmm.
I, now try to find ways of hearing that. I haven't had one in a long time, but what I should have done was said, okay, well, if this is how they feel, how can I make this better for my customer? So let's
Yeah.
say the getting lost in the mail thing, maybe I need to make that more prominent in my policies. And
Yeah.
that's how I should have handled that. Versus saying, well, I'm so sorry, I'll send it out to you tomorrow. If that still isn't good enough, then, how can we make it even better? And
Yeah.
that's truly the way that we need to handle it. Even if that's hard.
Yeah. Now, what does a typical day look like for you? How do you break up your time during the day and getting all what you need to get done to run your business, and still taking into account that you have a family life too?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be really honest with you. This answer is not what it used to be. So, a couple years ago, I got really sick with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and what that basically means is that all the nerves in your body attack the good and the bad.
Mm.
And so within 24 hours, I was fine. And then within 24 hours, I couldn't walk, I couldn't use my hands, and I couldn't use anything on my face.
Mm.
And so I had to shut down my Etsy shop as I was hospitalized for months. So I had to shut down for months. And so back in the day, before, when I was healthier, a normal day was different than it is now. So I would say back in the day, I used to wake up around 7 o'clock, take my kids to school, and then I would come back and I would look at any emails that I had overnight or during the day. And that's usually people approving their item and their proof.
Mm-hmm.
And then the printer would start. I have a really nice high grade printer. And so it would start doing its thing while I then started working on new orders that have come in. And then I usually would do that until lunch. I sometimes work through lunch, sometimes take a break, and then I would exercise and go get my kids around 3. Sometimes I would then still work for another couple hours until 5, and then I tried to cut off for the day, which took time. One thing that people don't get about being an entrepreneur, you have so many people that say, oh, I'm so envious of your flexibility.
Yeah.
But the other thing, while they're very right, if my kid has a doctor's appointment, I can always take them, and that is a beautiful thing. However, what they don't realize is that there's no such thing as time off. And so, if I take them to the doctor's appointment, that means that then I have to work until 10 that night.
Yeah.
Or it's also a lot harder to shut off my brain because I'm my toughest critic. And so that's a tough thing. Now, going back to the question, now my average day is different. I have to go by the way that I feel every day, health-wise. So now I wake up and the time varies. So sometimes at 7, sometimes at 8:30. And my husband and I take the kids to school on different days. And then now every day I read a book for 30 minutes, either usually a business book, sometimes a pleasure book. And I kind of just get my body ready for the day. And I love that. And then the rest of it kind of follows suit to what I did before, with some time for self-love. So if I find myself sitting for too long, then I really try to make myself, get up and move around and listen to what my body is telling me to do.
Yeah.
And so that really, really works. And then I try to be done, usually by 5 o'clock at the latest. And that way I can then enjoy the rest of the day with my kids. And I am very adamant, and I've done this for a long time now, that I do not work on the weekends.
Nice.
And so I actually have that in all my listings. So that is treasured time with the kiddos, and the weekends are wonderful to rejuvenate.
Yeah. I like that. What are you reading now, if you don't mind sharing?
So I have really been into the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I'm on the third one. I'm about halfway through the third one. So that is my personal one that I'm reading. And then the business one that I just finished a couple days ago. I want to say it's called Jib Jab. The problem with Kindle is I never know the name. Jab, 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 right hook.
Hook. Oh, yes.
And so that one I just finished a couple days ago. And the other business one that I highly recommend, and it might be one of my favorite books of all time, is by Jen Sincero, and it's called You Are a Badass. And
Is that Jan or Janet Sincero?
Jen,
Jen.
Jen.
Okay.
And that book is just awesome. And it's about seeing, just working to your full self, whatever that may mean. And really and truly, I read that one maybe a couple months ago, and I feel like my business is changing to a place that I'm in love with since I've read it.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm so glad that you threw in that you read personal books, just books to entertain you and books to educate you as well, because I try to do that as well. And so I like that you've made a point of doing that. And I will link to the books. I didn't know until I saw the movie Crazy Rich Asians that it was actually a trilogy. And my friend goes, yeah, they're more books. And so I got into it too, because she was like, yeah, you can read the book. I was like, oh yeah. I didn't know. And they're actually making the sequel. I don't know if you heard.
Oh, they are?
They are. They
wonderful.
Just announced that a couple of weeks ago. So yes. Now, one of the things that you mentioned was you have a Guillain-Barré syndrome. And when you first got it, I know you had to shut down your Etsy shop, which you've talked about before, earlier in our conversation. For others who might be experiencing some type of health issue or some other life crisis that requires them to put their Etsy shop or their business on pause for what might be an indefinite amount of time, what advice can you give to that person listening about how to and what it takes to run your business when life strikes and after just picking up from having to deal with something that just changes everything?
It's funny. The day that I went to the hospital, I told the doctor that I couldn't stay there for more than one night because I had work to do. And I'm so proud of that doctor for not laughing in my face, because it's, I'm sure that they were thinking, like, you have any control over this.
Yeah.
And of course, I was hospitalized for months. So what I would really say is just come to peace, because there's nothing that you can do about it. So, yes, fight to get your body back to the best that you think it can be, but just come to peace with the fact that, these things are happening and you can't change it. So spending your energy on negativity is not going to help. One thing that now, like you said, I still have Guillain-Barré, is the way that we say this, as your nerves fluctuate every day, is sometimes I'll try to figure out why I'm not having a great day. And I'll ask some, family that are physicians, I'll ask them, do you think it's because I've been working too hard or doing this? And they always tell me, Cristina, one thing I know for sure, stress is never good for the body.
Yeah.
And so that is what I would say is listen to your stress levels. And it is much easier said than done. I'm sure that if my husband would be here, he would be going, oh, yeah, right. Because, he knows that I am a very hard worker. But, just keep preaching it to yourself. The other thing I would say is self-love is incredibly important. And just, coming to terms with you are good and you are worthy, and, just do your best. And that is already right there amazing. So something that someone told me recently that I really liked, I, for example, am supposed to get, by physical therapy orders, I'm supposed to get massages about every 3 to 4 weeks for my nerves to regenerate. I get them like maybe 4 times a year because I don't think that I can go do that. I have to work, etc. And somebody recently told me, stop thinking of it as a luxury and think of it instead as that's part of your job. So your job that day is to go do this because you need that in order to produce and to design and to sell things.
Yeah.
And what I know it sounds so simple, but I went that, to get a massage, and it really and truly, I said, okay, I have to do this today. This is like a meeting, and I felt zero guilt because I shouldn't. It is just something that happened and I need it. So I think that those are big things I could say, is just give yourself self-love and feel peace with yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. You also sell not just on Etsy, but you have, you also sell on Amazon as well.
I do.
Are you active on Amazon with your selling, or is it something that's a bit more passive?
No, I am quite active on it. And I actually list the same things on both platforms.
Okay.
Because you have very different buyers on both platforms.
Yeah.
I would say that I have probably 30% more males than I do on Etsy. Shopping
on Amazon?
Yes.
Interesting.
So, funny enough, what that normally means is that I sell significantly more items with priority shipping on Amazon because men usually shop last minute.
Yes.
And so, and they are the sweetest customers, let me tell you, because they write in their seller note, just do whatever you want. My life, she won't care as long as you think it's pretty.
That's sweet.
Yes, it's so lovely. So, but yeah, I'm active on both. I needed both. We talked about the roller coaster of when you don't have sales. And so, I joined when the sales on Etsy were just really diminishing for me at one point. And I, flatly just needed the income. And so, and it definitely helped, ever since. And so, I'm grateful to both platforms, and I think both platforms are awesome for all kinds of customers. So for now, I don't plan on changing that. I enjoy selling on both of them quite a bit.
Okay. And with Amazon, you're specifically on the handmade at Amazon platform, which I know also shows up in the main Amazon, but that's how you sign, or I shouldn't say is that how you got connected with Amazon?
It is. When they first rolled out, they only invited kind of a select few of people, and I somehow was one of them.
Somehow.
And so I don't know. I really don't. But I applied and obviously got accepted. And so, yeah, it shows up on main search. And with all of that, I think the number one thing that I really would say business-wise that I have been working on the last couple of years is just learning that every job is always ever changing. So as Etsy makes changes, instead of going to a negative space, just say, okay, well, I need to work with this now.
Yeah.
And so I do the same thing if Amazon announces, okay, well, I guess I need to work with this now, because complaining about it is not going to get anything done. So
it's not going to change their minds.
Yeah. So, I mean, unless you have something really, that you feel is truly constructive, or, I remember when Etsy, when we first started, or when I first started, did not have, the templates that you can do in combos on certain combos that you do. And so I was one of the first people, I think they had a few of us try it. And so that feedback, I think is great. I wrote them back and I said, this has saved me so much time. I love this.
Mm.
And so that kind of stuff I think is wonderful. But if you know that there are certain things that you can't change, just say, all right, well, I guess this is how it's going to be. Let me make my business the best that it can be with these new platforms or with these new rules in place.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm with you on that. If just stay constructive, stay productive. And did anyone ever respond when you thanked them for the new templates? I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, great.
I think within an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just yeah, oh, we're so glad to know that. We've been hearing really positive feedback. I think we're going to roll it out. And sure enough.
Oh, that's good to know. I've never thought about, because there's some things that they've implemented that I really appreciated and thought, wow, this is great. I'm surprised I didn't think about this. But it's something that I found very helpful, but I've never thought to write and say thank you.
Yeah, because that's not the majority of what they're getting.
Yeah.
And
This is
so,
true.
yeah. Positivity is good.
Now, since you sell on two different platforms, Amazon and Etsy, and I know that they're both structured slightly differently when it comes to fees and how they have all that set up, does that affect your pricing strategy on either platform?
That's a good question. So I do make a little bit less on Amazon for sales than I do on Etsy, or at least I should say I did. Now that Etsy has changed their fees, that is a little bit different. But I price them the same. And the main reason for that is I don't want my customers to have to go, well, I feel like I got ripped off because I went to, LaceyFields.etsy.com and I paid more than if I had done this.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's fair to my customer. And because of the price point of my items, which they are not, they're lower price points, the fee difference is really quite minimal. And so I can say that if somebody's selling items that are $200-$300, now that's going to be different. But so I don't. The one way that I do is with shipping on Amazon. It's not as easy for me to manually say, I just want this to be $2. And so the lowest I can really get it on a template is at $4. And so with my cards, I therefore have to make my cards a lot cheaper so that in total, the card comes out to about the same as what I charge on Amazon. I mean, on Etsy.
On Etsy. Oh, okay. Wow. Seems like it takes, well, not a lot, but you have to sit down and really figure out how to make it all balance out on both platforms so that at least you don't come out on the losing end on either one.
Yeah. And I think, it's, I remember the first time I listed a product on Etsy, it took me half an hour. And then after a while, it becomes second nature, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same thing with this. I really don't stress very much anymore about some of these things that I simply can't change. And so I go, okay, well, I know that it'll work out. So let me spend my time on learning this and it'll work out for me. And so, and by the way, sometimes it does not work out, but I know that that's okay too.
Yeah.
I have had many a times ideas. I had a time where I decided I was going to start doing paintings, as I really enjoy that. And that was a total bust. It was not my strength. I definitely preferred designing on the computer. And so, yeah, I wasted some money and I wasted time. But that is going to happen. Every business has its good and its bad.
Yeah.
And so you have to say, okay, I've learned my lesson. What did I like from that? Why did I feel like I wanted to do that?
Yeah.
And then, take those good things from it and tell yourself, okay, but I don't enjoy working off the computer as much. So I won't be focusing on that anymore.
Okay.
And just go from there.
Okay. I like that. And I think it's important that we do build in some room for trial and error and learning and growing into our businesses. Now, can we talk about how you promote your Etsy shop? I know on the Amazon side it works a bit differently, and Amazon is, well, it's Amazon. People are there, and people are on Etsy too. I shouldn't say it's Amazon, like nobody's on Etsy. People are on Etsy as well. But I know with Etsy, we have a little bit more freedom to promote our shops and our products and drive some of our own traffic. And it's not exactly the same on Amazon. So how do you do all that?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying before with the business changing. I'll be honest, when I first launched, I really didn't do anything because I was still figuring out the ropes, and, something that now would take me maybe 14 to 18 minutes on average, it could have taken me 2 hours before. And so it's really a matter of what time I had. Now that I've become a lot better at it, and now that I will admit, like I said, Etsy sales have decreased, I finally, just really the last few months, have started doing social media. So I do things on Facebook, I post on Instagram, and one thing I do not do is make my Instagram posts, buy this from me. Mine are much more real and real life, and why I design certain things. Like I do something on my Instagram stories every Tuesday called Tell It Like It Is Tuesday. And for example, last Tuesday I had the worst migraine ever, and that was my Tell It Like It Is. It was, hey, this is the day of an entrepreneur as well. Sometimes we feel crummy. And, and that's my platform. One thing that I don't feel like people give enough love to is Pinterest. Particularly for Etsy sellers, Pinterest can be quite a blessing. And so, if you do things on Facebook and you have 25 people like it, well, on Pinterest, you can have thousands of monthly views with, in my opinion, not as much work. So that is where I am focusing my attention on more and more and more lately. And that's kind of my plan as I move forward.
Is Pinterest?
Yeah. Making my boards interesting, pinning things that I think are interesting, and really giving my personal attention to them on things that are not just Lacey Fields related, but, just things that I say, I would want to repin this, or I love that, somebody put, for example, a pin on 7 tips on Instagram posts. Well, I'm going to pin that because I would want that. So I want other people to see it as well. And when they do that, when they start following your pins, they're going to start seeing your pins for your personal stuff as well. And so then they'll start seeing that invitation, and, well, what do you know? They have a daughter that's in love with unicorns, and look what came up, a unicorn invitation.
Yeah.
And so it's free advertising. It takes time, but it's free. And so I really, really think Pinterest doesn't get enough business love.
Now, for Pinterest and your Etsy shop, do you do more than just after you do a listing, click the Pinterest button to pin it on a board? Or do you actually go into Pinterest and do something more than just what Etsy, the quick link Etsy allows us to do?
Yeah. So, again, evolving, right? So I definitely, that's all I used to do. I used to just press pin.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, every single Etsy shop owner should be doing that for every item.
Yeah.
If you don't have time, you
can do that much.
Especially if this is like a part-time thing for you, and you're, some people say that they use it as their, shopping fund or whatever. So absolutely, that takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
One thing I have done lately, though, within the last month, is I have gone through and I have started to change the information, because it pins what you have on Etsy, but the Etsy sellers and Pinterest customers or just people aren't going to necessarily be searching the same thing. If you're going on Etsy, you're much more likely to be shopping. And on Pinterest, they might be kind of perusing for now. So I use the Pinterest search to tell me tips on what people are using. And then I change the titles of my items in Pinterest, which takes more time. So, but like I said, that's relatively new. So I will see if that works or not.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yes. And I do agree that pin button for everything you list is the easiest way to at least just get there. And I know even having done it the lazy way, initially there are some listings that all I did was click that pin, and I haven't had time to go back to some of my older listings and, like you said, maybe change the title or what have you. I started doing that more recently, but I never went back to fix the things I had done before because I just thought it was not a top priority. But even those still get clicks and links back to my Etsy shop. So if you don't have time to do anything else, at least do that, because it does pay off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really and truly a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
And I do it the second that I list something, I automatically do that.
Yeah.
So that that way, if I don't have time to go back and change the stuff on Pinterest, or I forget, or whatever it may be, it's automatically up there. And they say that for prime Pinterest, making it worthy as possible, you should do at least 5 pins a day. So if I roll out a couple cards that day, well, now I only need to find 3 things to pin. So it helps you more ways than one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't think about that. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and already feeling overwhelmed with the idea of pinning 5 things a day, I just did a podcast episode. Oh, I don't know the episode number, but it was with Melissa Meganson. And she's a marketing manager for Tailwind. And Tailwind is a tool that basically just makes it easier for you to pin things to Pinterest and Instagram as well. It was episode 235. I will link to that. And she talks about just how to use the tool. It's approved by Pinterest. Pinterest is one of those platforms that's particular about who they allow, what third-party tools they allow to interface with their site. And some people have gotten their accounts shut down because they're using apps that are not approved by the platforms, and Tailwind is, and they've been good about that. So I had a conversation with Melissa talking about that, because I know that's something that we all kind of struggle with, is just juggling social media and having the time to do, even though 5 sounds like a small number, but then it can also sound overwhelming to say, okay, pin 5 things a day. And so it helps you with that. So I will link to that episode. They have lots of free tutorials, and you can sign up for free. If you go to convome.com/tailwind, you don't have to pay for an account. You at least not upfront. You can still do a lot with their free, with just the free level, where you just start an account, and then if you want to do some more advanced stuff, then you can pay. And I don't remember how much it costs, but yeah. So you can listen to that conversation, and their tutorials are free on YouTube. I also link to those as well.
I'm so excited to hear you say this, because I had not listened to that podcast yet for Tailwind, and I just looked at it on Friday.
Oh, you did?
So I just wrote down to myself number 236, because
235.
235. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you said, okay, perfect.
Sorry.
Because it's a great way to schedule them. So
yes.
If you just tell yourself, I'm going to sit down and do this for an hour today, you can schedule out your pins for the next couple weeks.
Exactly.
So And that's really, yes, with social media, like I said, it's not something I did nearly as much. When I came back after my illness, I started focusing on it,
Yeah.
and it can feel very overwhelming. And so I still haven't figured out the perfect match for it, but I kind of just tell myself every day, like, I want to get at least these two things done. And if some of the other ones don't get done, you just have to be able to move on. Because
Yeah.
if you start thinking of it as, well, I have to get an Instagram post out there today, it's going to start not feeling authentic.
Yes.
And it's actually going to do more harm than good.
Yes. Oh, I agree with you. I would always feel that pressure. And then I started realizing that the pressure I felt was making me not sound the way I wanted to sound. And so I just decided to take a step back and say, okay, well, I won't respond to the pressure. I'll respond to what I really feel moved and led to do or say.
Exactly.
And it makes a difference. One of the things that you're doing, Cristina, is you also, in addition to having a presence on social media, also have a website where you blog, and that's LaceyFields.com. If you want to go directly there, it's LaceyFields.com. I will link to that also in the show notes for this episode. How do you tie in your LaceyFields.com website to what you're doing on Etsy and / or Amazon? How does having your own independent website fit into the grand scheme of your business?
Well, I'm going to tell you, the main reason I did it to begin with was very therapeutic, and it was to write my story with my illness. And so my first post on it ever said, how does being a small business owner and someone recovering from an illness tie together? Well, it doesn't, but that's my life. And so I really just said, you know what, this is my authentic life, and I want other people to be able to have it as something to read if they're going through something, or just wanting to get to know the person that they're buying from, because I love getting to know my customers. And so I hope they want to get to know me. And so now, since I've come back a little stronger, recently, I've started using it for other things as well. One thing that I'm doing is once a month, I am sharing a free phone wallpaper that I design. And what it is it's called Lacey Fields Designs. And I choose one word a month, and I make up a definition for that word. And so this last month, for example, I chose the word friends, and I put things such as, you are worthy of them. It's okay if you feel like you don't have the right number of them. And because I think as women, or just everyone, we often think, well, why don't I have, the 50 close-knit friends that this person has on social media? And you know what? Everybody feels like that, and that's okay. And everybody is worthy of wonderful friends. And I think I even said, the weirder the friend, the better, because my best friends, we are all so kooky. And I think that's what makes us work. And we love each other for who we are. And so that's one thing that I'm starting to do as well. It's just a space for me to be my authentic self and to hopefully help others.
That's very encouraging to me, because I do agree with you. I know people connect with people. And so that's a great way for people to connect with you as a person. And not just a person, but the person behind, the products that they love. And I have to challenge myself, because sometimes, and I guess I don't know why I'm saying this, but with convome.com is the website for the podcast, and in my head, I don't know why I have this thing about, well, it's just the podcast, and the podcast is not you. So keep it to the podcast, and don't don't cross the line between the podcast and you because you're two separate entities. But there's another part of me that feels like, well, maybe people want to know you a bit more and want to know more about the person and not just, okay, Etsy this and Etsy that, and let's talk about Etsy. And so hearing you say that, reminds me, or I shouldn't say, but challenges me to maybe take a step and dig a bit deeper and say, well, there is a person behind the podcast, and maybe, it would be nice to open up a bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, well, and I try to think a lot as, some people, for example, with you, I would say a lot of people love podcasts, but what if somebody is not in a place where they can hear the podcast? Well, then they might be sitting there, nursing a baby at 1 a.m. and reading stuff that you wrote. And so, getting to know you on all different kinds of platforms is a good thing. That being said, it takes time. Yeah. And so for me, the blog is really, I think I had a year where I didn't write. And so for me, it's much more of a, today I don't feel enthralled by designing, and it's just not there. Yeah. But you know what I feel like doing? I feel like typing. And so then I'll sit there and I'll type. Yeah. And so if nothing else, I think an outlet is really good for anybody that sells on Etsy. We're all very artistic and creative minded, right? Yeah, and yes. We all need our outlets. And so it's a good one for me. That and adult coloring, those two things.
Oh, yes. I love coloring. I have to say, on LaceyFields.com, there's a post, the welcome home post, and the picture you have is adorable. What I love is someone is holding the baby on a table, but you can tell the person is like behind a door, so it looks like the baby is sitting on it. It just made me crack up.
Yeah, that was my son. He couldn't walk yet at the time that I got sick. He was too young. And I had a dear friend that took care of my children for me while I was hospitalized out of just the kindness of her heart. And she was a teacher, and she was on Christmas break. And instead of using it to take her break, she used it to love on my 3 kids. And so when I came home, we wanted a picture. And he couldn't stand up yet, so she said, "Here, let me hold him."
That's exactly what it looked like too.
Yep. And we didn't even try to hide it. We were like, good enough. I hadn't, I wore PJs for 7 months because that was the only kind of clothes I could put on by myself. So we weren't looking for extravagant at the time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself and being so open and honest with what the struggle that it can be. I think so many of us struggle with different things, but perhaps sometimes we just feel like if we admit it, we'll look like the odd one out. We'll look like the one who has, the problems we can't handle. But in reality, we all have something we're dealing with. So I really so much appreciate you just being open about all that.
Yeah, that's been really important to me. Just because I've always said you meet people that are very private and you meet people that aren't. And I am definitely on the I am not. I've never really been that kind of person, so I kind of thought to myself, well, you know what, then let me use that for good. Yeah. And so, this is who I am. And I have many wonderful blessings in my life. I'm very happily married. I have 3 beautiful kids, but we have some tough stuff and just like everybody else. And so I'm going to share that so that hopefully they don't feel alone. And if they want to share, then they have somebody they can share with.
Yeah. Again, Cristina's blog is on her website, LaceyFields.com. I will link to that in the notes for this episode. Cristina, what is something, maybe 1 or 2 things that about selling on Etsy that you really like? And on the flip side, are there any features that you would like to see Etsy implement that currently don't yet exist on the platform?
Okay, so let's go with the things I like.
Mhm.
I like it from a business standpoint that it is a place to have a creative outlet. And I like that, honestly, it gave me my career, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what a blessing that has been. And I also, from a personal standpoint, I love that it now has also become a place I shop.
Yeah.
So, I, as an Etsy owner, I know how important it is to people that own Etsy shops. So if I give gifts, 99% of them are from Etsy.
Mhm.
And I really encourage others to do the same. And even if that means you're paying a couple dollars more than if you would get the same item from someplace manufactured, you're giving it to a small business owner that will love that order, and it'll mean something to them.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would say I love about Etsy, I forgot, is that you get to know your customers. And as I design things, for example, I made one card that was to give to teachers, and I made it in Spanish because my children go to a bilingual school, and I had someone write me and say, I have been looking for this for
Hmm.
years. And so things like that you go, well, I'm so glad that I made your day happy,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that really is a gift. As for the features, I think the number one thing that I would love for them to do is to have where the variations could be personalized by the customer. And so, for example, if I would say, instead of saying, put your note in the seller's note, I feel like very few customers know about the seller's note.
Yeah.
And I feel like very few customers read the listing details. And so if, when they go in, for example, on my prints, I can have them say, do you want an 8x10 or an 11x14? And they always click that because it's required.
Mhm.
So I wish I could have a variation where I would say, for example, migraines suck, I'm here for you, Hannah. Where I could have on that variation, type the name here that you
Yeah.
want, and it would be required to make the purchase. And I think it would make the customer understand the buying process a
Right.
lot more.
That's a good one. I like that. Okay. Hopefully they're listening.
Yeah.
Now you've been selling on Etsy for 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've been around long enough. And I would like, if you don't mind, you to talk to that person who has been selling on Etsy for maybe just about the same time, maybe not quite as long, but who is in a drought period right now selling on Etsy. I know you've already given some advice about taking care of other things that need to be handled in your business, but what encouragement can you offer that person, just in the way of sticking it out? As far as keeping your business running, we talked
Yeah.
about, handling other things that need to be handled. But sometimes people just need an encouraging word
Yeah.
that just helps them push through. What would you say to that person?
It's a good question. I think number one, I would say you're not alone. Because I think overall, I think a lot of people on Etsy have felt slower, views and sales, myself included. And I think that's really common right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into whether I think that is partially because of things that Etsy has done or not, because like I've said, that brings negativity, and I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So I would say, one, you are not alone. Two, keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
So, perfect your listings. I recently discovered Marmalade.
Yeah.
And so I did that all last month. I thought, okay, well then let me take the time to make some of my listings better, and that's what I did. Let me take the time to write on my blog. There's nothing, a negative space is not going to help you. So just keep on keeping on, and keep on being your authentic self. And and things will come. It might take months, but things will come, and just keep opening doors for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That does help. Are there any tools or resources? I know you just mentioned Marmalade, but in addition to that, Marmalade and the Dymo printer that we talked about earlier, any other tools or resources that you're currently using to run your business that you found particularly helpful?
That's a good question. This is going to sound silly.
No.
Because this is not the number one thing I can tell someone. Two things. First off is get off a laptop and get yourself a desktop if you are on the computer a lot like I am.
Oh.
And I just think it's essential. This other tool that has been essential for me is a good chair. Again, for people that are on their computer a lot, you're talking back pain, shoulder pain, and everything in between. My one caveat to this, because it's kind of the question you asked, kind of not. The number one tip I give people when they ask me about working from home, my husband is always such a sweetheart, and he always tells people that he never could have done it because he could never focus at home. He would, have a squirrel moment and go do something else.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to do this, my husband and I had a very frank conversation with him. And I said, if I do this while during the day, I am at work. I am not at home. So that means that I do not do laundry. I do not cook for the day. I am working. And so that would be the number one thing I would tell people is do not have those squirrel moments. Tell yourself I am working, or set a timer and say I am working for the next hour. No matter what, I am not at home to talk to a delivery guy or anything in between.
Yeah.
And that will help tremendously with feeling efficient.
I like that. Putting boundaries on your time when you're in the house, because you're so right. That's the easiest place and time to get distracted. If not us getting distracted by ourselves, other people, getting phone calls in the middle of the day, where people might have a slight hesitation to call you if they knew you were at an office. They don't quite have the same hesitation if they know you work from home. Because it's like, well, nobody else is there. Why can't you talk?
Absolutely. And that is, for other people listening that are mommies, that is the number one thing that I had to work on with my kids, because they thought, well, mommy is home.
Yeah.
So like over the summer, they're like, I'm going to go talk to mommy. And, so I can't count the amount of times that I told them, hey, did you guys go ask daddy about, if this drawing looks nice? And they said, well, no, because he's at work. And then they kind of thought, uh-oh, so are you. Okay, I get it, mommy. I get where you're going. So, it really has to go for everybody, and just, instructing everyone. My husband has even realized that if he needs to get in touch with me, then he needs to send me something to my work email. That's the only way that I'm going to see something. If he sends it to my personal email, I won't see it till the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so just working out things like that with your unit on how to make everything work.
Yeah. I like that example of, did you ask daddy if this drawing looks nice at work? You're like, no, he's at work. Hello.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah. Every day.
Now, Cristina, I didn't ask you ahead of time, and if you don't have one, that's okay. But do you have an Etsy shop shout out? And this would be another Etsy shop or another Etsy seller that perhaps you just want to say thank you to, or just give kudos to, maybe somebody that has helped you along the way, or a store that you particularly enjoy shopping in.
Oh my gosh, I do. And the name is escaping me right now. I might send you her link afterwards. There is one that if you look in my listings, I have like a fabric banner in the back of my listings that she designed for me.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And she designed that for me. And then she also designed, my daughter was born on July 4th, and she designed a beautiful July 4th banner for my family.
Oh,
And
nice.
she just is so talented, and so lovely every time that we interact. So I would say that one. And
Okay.
then my other one artistically, and she is huge, is Katie Daisy, or the Wheatfield is the name of her Etsy shop.
The wheat
Um,
field?
yes, and Katie Daisy has sold at Pottery Barn and at Target,
Mm.
but she paints, and she is just astronomically talented. I have probably 5 or 6 pieces of her artwork around my home. I have her book. So her work is absolutely stunning. So those are the two that immediately came to mind for me.
Okay. So I will link to both of those Etsy shops so you can go and check them out. And I will have the link to the first one that Christina
Yes.
mentioned.
I need to go under my purchases. I have a name in my mind, but I'm scared it's wrong. So I'd rather
Okay.
just send it to you.
All right. Not a problem. And Christina, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can connect with you?
They can email me at
Okay.
howdy@LaceyFields.com.
Okay.
And people often ask me actually how I came up with my business name. And
I
they,
meant to actually.
yeah. So the answer is that I actually kept my maiden name when I married. And so my maiden name is Ramirez.
Okay.
And my husband's last name is Lacefield, like a field of lace. And
Oh.
so I wanted to, I often say that Lacey Fields is my fourth baby. And so therefore my 3 kids have the last name Lacefield. So this
Uh,
became Lacey Fields.
okay.
And so, yeah, and I've had it ever since.
Oh, yes. It's funny because I actually made a note to ask what the genesis or the story behind the name was. So
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
actually mentioning
People often think my first name is Lacey if they write me combos,
that.
which makes sense. But
Yeah.
no, it's just kind of a play on words for my husband's and kids' last name.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Christina, thank you so much again for being my guest. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And like I said, thank you so much for your authenticity and sharing your story and just how you've been able to work through some of the obstacles that you had to face and still make running your own business work. I think it's an encouragement for all of us because we all hit different obstacles along the way. And so to hear from someone who has done that and has come back and says it's not easy, but it's doable. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a ton of fun.
Thank you. You are so welcome. And I would love to catch up again. I feel like your story is still evolving. And so hopefully we can do an update episode sometime in the future, not too far in the future, hopefully.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Yes, I would love to, especially since, like I said, so much of what I'm doing now is really trying to be truly authentic in our
Yeah.
brand and our vision. So I'm excited to see that relate to people.
Yeah. Great. So it's a date. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back next week. Hi again. So a couple of things I wanted to add. The Etsy shop shout out for the store that Christina wanted to mention. That particular shop is Polka Dot Addiction. That's Polka Dot Addiction, and it's run by Keisha Campbell. And there will be a link to it in the show notes for this episode.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.